The Dragon Ball franchise originally began with Akira Toriyama's original manga titled simply Dragon Ball. Initially conceived as a gag manga, Dragon Ball slowly transitioned into a fully fledged martial arts action series, setting a new standard for future shonen manga. Created and illustrated by the legendary Akira Toriyama, the series ran for a total of 520 chapters, including one side story. It debuted on November 20th, 1984, in the pages of Weekly Shonen Jump, one of Japan's most popular manga magazines. The manga story begins with Bulma discovering Goku living alone in the forest and concludes with Goku's victory at the 23rd Tenkaichi Budokai against Piccolo Jr. When talking about Dragon Ball Z, something many fans don't realize is that the distinction between Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z exists only in the anime. In the original manga, the entire story from Bulma meeting Goku all the way to the defeat of Kid Buu is simply titled Dragon Ball. The split into Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z came as an anime adaptation approached by a major turning point in the story, which was the arrival of Raditz. The animation team at Toei Animation approached Toriyama about renaming the anime to reflect this new direction and shift in tone. Believing that the story was nearing its conclusion, Toriyama agreed and suggested a subtle change, adding the final letter of the alphabet to the title. Thus, Dragon Ball Z was born, symbolizing what he thought would be the end of the saga. With the anime adaptation in full swing, the story began to branch into new directions. Two major additions came from Toei Animation's control of the animated series: filler episodes and anime-exclusive movies and specials. For those unfamiliar, filler refers to content that doesn't exist in the original manga. These episodes or arcs are created to buy time for the manga to get further ahead, preventing the anime from catching up and forcing a production halt. While some fans enjoy filler for its additional character moments, others see it as unnecessary and often skip it. The impact of filler in Dragon Ball Z varies. Some filler episodes created minor inconsistencies that are later resolved or simply ignored. Others, however, go as far as to alter key events, leading the anime and manga to diverge significantly, to the point where they start to become two different versions of the same story. A minor inconsistency created by filler appears in episode 20 of Dragon Ball Z. In this episode, Kaio tells Goku that Planet Vegeta was destroyed by its own god, who brought down a meteor shower to wipe it out. This story is exclusive to the anime. In the original manga, chapter 197, and in episode 2 of the anime, Raditz claims that Planet Vegeta was destroyed by meteors, something that the remaining Saiyans were led to believe. However, the truth is later revealed in chapter 257 of the manga and episode 49 of the anime, when Dodoria confirms that Frieza was actually responsible for the planet's destruction. At no point is Frieza depicted as a god to the Saiyans, nor is there any indication that the Saiyans viewed him as one. Furthermore, Kaio is well aware of Frieza's power and influence in the universe, making it highly unlikely he would confuse Frieza's actions with that of a deity. This type of filler introduces a minor contradiction that is eventually cleared up by the canonical story. A filler moment that could be easily dismissed occurs in episode 18 of Dragon Ball Z. In this episode, Gohan transforms into an Ozaru for the first time, causing widespread destruction, even though Piccolo had already destroyed the moon in a previous episode. To resolve this inconsistency, the anime introduces a new element: Goku's old spaceship, which is said to be emitting a strange beam of light that triggers Gohan's transformation. Piccolo then destroys the ship using a Makanko Sappo, returning Gohan to normal. However, this event contradicts later in canon. In episode 46, Goku tells everyone that his original spaceship was found intact and will be used as a reference to build a new one for his journey to Namek. Clearly, if it had been destroyed earlier, this wouldn't have been possible. There are also geographical inconsistencies. It's unlikely Goku's spaceship would be randomly sitting far from Mount Pausa, where Grandpa Gohan lived. While it's not impossible that Grandpa Gohan discovered the ship during his travels, Dr. Brief later finds it with no issue, suggesting it was likely close to Goku's home. In this case, Toei Animation took an undeveloped part of the story and used it for filler, but Toriyama would later incorporate the same element in a different canon-compliant way. As a result, this episode can be easily written off without affecting the broader narrative. A much larger contradiction, however, caused by filler lies in the backstory of future Trunks. In the manga's extra chapter, Trunks is already a Super Saiyan throughout his appearance. However, in the anime version, adapted into a TV special, Trunks begins as a regular teenager who is not yet able to transform. The anime shows Trunks finally achieving the transformation after discovering Gohan's lifeless body, following the battle with androids 17 and 18. This change likely added emotional weight to the story, as seeing Trunks earn the transformation gave the special more dramatic effect. Nevertheless, this completely alters the original sequence of events, causing a direct divergence between the anime and the manga. From this point onward, two stories follow different paths, with the anime adapting the altered version as canon within its continuity. Garlic Jr. was originally the main protagonist in Dragon Ball Z Movie 1, a story that doesn't fit into the anime timeline for several reasons. Gohan's age and outfit in the movie suggests it takes place just before Raditz's arrival. However, that wouldn't be possible as Goku dies during that arc, and Gohan was supposed to be training with Piccolo at the time. In addition to this, Krillin wouldn't have reacted so surprised upon meeting Gohan at Kame House if he had already encountered him during a major battle with Garlic Jr. Goku also wields the Nyoibo in the movie, which is an error since he already left it atop Karin Tower prior to that point. Because of this reference, the Garlic Jr. arc is directly treated as canon within the anime, further widening the gap between the anime and the manga versions of the story. Now, many fans may argue that filler segments in the anime aren't canon and that only scenes adapted from the manga should be considered part of the true Dragon Ball story. And while that logic holds true if we're strictly discussing the original manga, it's not quite that simple when evaluating the Dragon Ball franchise as a whole. Factually speaking, the anime is just as much a part of the Dragon Ball story. Since Toei Animation owns the rights to the anime adaptation, they are legally permitted to modify the story in ways that differ from the manga. These instances are better classified as continuity discrepancies rather than non-events. Although Dragon Ball Z was initially created to be a direct adaptation of the manga, over time it became clear that Toei Animation was retroactively shaping its own version of the narrative. This branching led to a unique continuity for the anime, one that sometimes diverged from Toriyama's original work. In fan debates, it's common to dismiss unwanted or conflicting material with the statement, well, Toriyama didn't write that. But in Dragon Ball's case, the extent of Toriyama's involvement across the franchise varies so greatly that there's rarely a simple answer. While he didn't write or draw every anime episode, he is a manga artist after all, and his influence on the anime was still very significant. The 2003 guidebook Son Goku Densetsu sheds light on Toriyama's contributions to the television series. Not only did he create original character designs for anime-exclusive elements like Paikuhan, Daikaio, and early versions of King Vegeta, but he also provided the foundation for many filler stories. In some cases, he'd submit rough ideas for memos that the Toei team would later flesh out into full storyline. This includes the backstory of the Saiyans, the Sulfurians, and the Z-Fighter illustrating training at God's Palace, and even minor details like Yamcha becoming a professional baseball player, all of which were based on concepts from Toriyama himself. So if you're basing the legitimacy of filler content purely on Toriyama's involvement, that's not the most reliable argument. While filler may not be a part of the original manga, it's still woven into the fabrics of the anime's canon. Dismissing it altogether overlooks the reality of how Dragon Ball as a multimedia franchise has evolved. Let's also take into account notable examples like Bardock. The original Bardock, Father of Goku television special, was a product of Toei Animation, with the storyline crafted by Taiyo Koyama and character designs developed through a collaborative effort between Akira Toriyama and Nakatsuru. Toriyama was so fond of the special's concept, he later incorporated a brief Bardock cameo into the manga itself. This suggests that at least during the original manga's run, the Bardock special had some level of canonical value. That leads us to the broader topic of the anime special episodes and theatrical films, another creative direction driven by Toei Animation to further expand the Dragon Ball universe. Between 1986 and 1999, during the original airing of Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z in Japan, Toei simultaneously released 17 theatrical films. These movies were generally created as standalone experiences for seasonal theatrical releases and rarely followed the exact storyline of the ongoing TV series. Despite the separation, the movies gave rise to some of the franchise's most iconic villains. Characters like Broly, Janemba, and Cooler were introduced to these films and have become deeply ingrained in the fandom. The decision to keep the movies distinct from the manga and anime continuity was a mutual agreement between Toei, the producers, and the other right holders. Koyama described the production process in an interview featured in the 2006 Dragon Box The Movies DVD set. He says, "When we created the movie stories, the process usually begins with a meeting between the scriptwriter, producer, and Toriyama Sensei's supervising editor. We'd brainstorm basic ideas such as the movie's villain and then would draft a plot based on our discussion. That plot would be sent to Toriyama Sensei for feedback, after which I'd begin writing the scenario with the producer's close involvement. One key restriction we follow was that the movie's events could not surpass the current storyline of the anime. For instance, even if I wanted to include fusion, I wouldn't be allowed to introduce it ahead of its debut in the anime or manga, so I had to stay aware of the TV's anime process. If we were covering the Frieza arc at the time, a natural extension might be to create a new villain like Frieza's older brother. During periods when the anime caught up to the manga, it became especially difficult to plan ahead, and I occasionally received direct input from Toriyama Sensei himself. Each movie took about 3 months from concept to completion. Given that Dragon Ball Z had 2 theatrical releases annually, I spent over half the year writing film scripts. This naturally raises the question, how did Toriyama himself view these films? In his super interview from Daizenshuu 6, Movies and TV Specials, Toriyama offered a modest take on the relationship with the movies. When being asked what is his personal stance on Dragon Ball theatrical films, he answers and says, "I see the movies as stories in a different dimension from the main comic storyline. I'm basically just an audience member for them." The Japanese phrase that Toriyama uses translates literally to a different dimension, but can be also understood as a separate plane or another level. This isn't necessarily a deep metaphysical statement about timelines or multiverses, and simply a clear way of saying that the movies exist separately from the main storyline. Although Toriyama says he views himself more as a spectator, this isn't entirely accurate. He still contributed to character designs for many of the films. His statement simply reflects that he wasn't the sole creative force guiding their stories or determining how they fit into the larger Dragon Ball narrative. Still though, the idea of a different dimension supports the notion that while these films don't occur within the same continuity as the original manga or anime, they do belong to the broader scope of the Dragon Ball universe. They are canon in the sense that they represent alternate stories or realities within the franchise, just not events that happen in the core storyline time were familiar with. So then the question becomes, were the Japanese audience aware of this at the time? And the answer is yes. Viewers in Japan during the original run clearly understood that these films were intended as side stories, existing outside of the main continuity of the series they were based on. In the August 1995 issue of Animerica, Oshiguchi, a regular contributor known for his From the Forest column and the operator of the Manga no Mori store in Japan, offered insight into how these films were viewed. He mentions that Toei's features tend to be side stories based on their animated or live-action series airing that year. These films are typically self-contained, lasting 30 to 40 minutes, and so as to not confuse children, don't follow the main TV continuity. In Japan, shows change annually, so the anime festival's lineup changes every year as well. As a result, most of the films tell isolated stories. However, with the long-running series like Dragon Ball, which continued for nearly a decade and had 2 theatrical releases each year, sticking to TV continuity became impractical. That's why the films typically avoided it altogether. Now, with that said, what did the official guidebook say? Well, there are 2 major sources to consider, Daizenshuu 6 and Daizenshuu 7. While the majority of films clearly don't fit within the manga or TV anime storyline due to contradictions and inconsistencies, Daizenshuu 6 does say something interesting. On each movie introduction page, it provides a vertical timeline showing where the movie could fit in the story if it were part of the continuity. However, these placements are purely hypothetical and often accompanied by clarification in the Japanese text. One key phrase frequently used is the phrase here. These can be considered parallel world events. This strongly suggests that even though placements are listed, the films are intended to be different stories and alternate timelines, ones that run alongside but separate from the main narrative. This is why context is critical. Simply glancing at the timelines and assuming the films are canon to the main story can be misleading. The surrounding commentary explains that these events occur in separate parallel settings. Given all the available information, from Toriyama's own statements to Toei's production's approach, guidebook commentary, and public understanding, it's consistent and accurate to view the movies as canon to the overall Dragon Ball franchise, but separate from the primary continuity of the manga and the anime. Due to timeline conflicts, character inconsistencies, and narrative contradictions, most of these films can't be smoothly integrated into the main story. Their structure, runtime, self-contained nature further suggests that they were meant to be enjoyed as alternate tales, fun extensions that enrich the world of Dragon Ball without affecting its core storyline. Now, with all that in mind, the Dragon Ball franchise currently runs 3 major streams of media side by side: the manga, the anime, and the movies. Each of these are considered official Dragon Ball content, but they exist in separate continuities. Think of them as 3 different streams of canon. Now, when discussing the Dragon Ball Z movies, we mentioned the guidebooks, a topic that often comes up in debates about what's considered canon in Dragon Ball. These guides are frequently questioned, and many fans tend to dismiss them outright, so it's worth taking a moment to understand their role within the franchise. The most comprehensive set of Dragon Ball guidebooks is the Daizenshuu, meaning the Great Complete Collection. This series was published shortly after the manga finished its serialization and consists of 7 hardcore volumes and 3 softcore supplemental books. These volumes cover a wide range of content, from the manga and the anime to the movies and even some trading card game they released in Japan. Each of the first 6 hardcover books include an interview with Akira Toriyama, and all 7 volumes were packed with bonus insert titles like the Shenlong Times, which feature interviews with key figures involving the makings of Dragon Ball. Altogether, the Daizenshuu series aims to provide a near-complete collection of knowledge about the Dragon Ball universe as it existed at the time. It's important to clarify that although Toriyama is credited as the author of the Daizenshuu series, his actual involvement was pretty minimal. In most of his written forewords, he acknowledges that the compilation and breakdown of the material were handled primarily by Shueisha and his production partners like Caramel Mama, often thanking them for organizing the complex world of Dragon Ball on his behalf. So with that being said, how should we treat guidebooks? These guidebooks, while not directly authored by Toriyama, are officially approved and published by Shueisha, making them reliable secondary sources. Since Dragon Ball is such a vast and detailed franchise, Toriyama entrusts his editorial and production teams with the task of providing clarity on subjects that the original manga or anime might not directly explain. That said, these materials should always be treated as secondary sources, the manga and the anime being the original works. If a statement from the Daizenshuu contradicts something clearly shown in the source material, then the guidebook entry is overwritten. However, if there's no contradiction and the guidebook expands upon or clarifies a concept from the main story, it is absolutely valid to use in discussion. In short, while not infallible, the Daizenshuu and other official guidebooks provide a valuable and trustworthy framework for understanding Dragon Ball. So just to conclude, in terms of canon status, all 3 of these streams would be considered canon: the manga's entry, the anime, and the movies. However, they're all a part of different continuities that aren't connected together. Now, with the Dragon Ball Z portion wrapped up, we now arrive at one of the most hotly debated topics in the Dragon Ball franchise. Following the immense popularity and success of the Dragon Ball Z TV series, Toei Animation decided to continue the franchise beyond the original manga's conclusion. This new series was titled Dragon Ball GT, with GT standing for Grand Touring. It picked up where Z left off and originally intended to expand on Toriyama's Dragon Ball world by taking Goku and others on a cosmic journey, starting notably with Goku turning back into a child. GT began airing on Fuji TV on February 7th, 1996, taking over Dragon Ball's time slot at 7 p.m. every Wednesday. Toriyama's direct involvement with GT was very limited. Outside of designing the series logo, the main characters, as well as providing a few promotional instructions, he was largely hands-off. The production team also underwent significant changes. Nakatsuru took full control as the character designer, and Togunaka joined as the new composer. Additionally, new producers from Toei and Fuji TV helped craft the story and overall direction of the series. The creation of Dragon Ball GT was primarily Toei's initiative. With Toriyama concluding the manga and considered the story complete, there was no new material for the anime to adapt. As a result, Toei steered the direction of the narrative on their own, which ultimately led to the development of GT and the debut on one of the franchise's most iconic forms, Super Saiyan 4. The real debate around GT shouldn't hinge on whether it's canon or not. It's about which continuity it belongs to. The truth is, Dragon Ball GT is indeed canon, but only to the anime continuity, and not the original manga. This distinction becomes even cleaner with Toriyama's own words. In the Dragon Ball GT Dragon Book, included in the Dragon Box GT DVD set released on June 15, 2005, Toriyama wrote the following: "My sincerest gratitude to all those who bought this Dragon Ball GT DVD box. Being a lazy bum by nature, I was absurdly happy when I managed to safely finish up Dragon Ball serialization, finally be released from deadline hell. The TV anime people wanted to continue for just a little bit more, but I just couldn't do any more than that. And so I left the Dragon Ball anime completely up to the anime staff, story and all. In car lingo, GT means Gran Turismo, a fast, higher powered car in other words. But in that case, I had GT meant Grand Touring, a great journey, since the scenario was that they'd be running around the universe. For GT, all I did was come up with the title, design the initial main cast and some of the machines, and also do a few images. However, I was able to rest easy handling other things to excellent staff who have continued on Dragon Ball for all this time. In particular, the animator Nakatsuru-kun is amazingly skilled and mastered the peculiarities of my drawings in no time at all, to the point where there were even times when I couldn't tell whether I had drawn a character design or if he had. For instance, one of Nakatsuru's designs was Super Saiyan 4, which appeared in GT, and the picture above is a portrait that I drew of it. Did I draw it well? Dragon Ball GT is a grand style story of the original Dragon Ball. It'll make me happy for us to watch and enjoy it together." Toriyama refers to GT as a grand size story and makes it clear that the anime staff had full creative control over this project. This aligns perfectly with the idea that GT is not a part of the manga's original continuity. However, it still fits comfortably within the anime timeline. So in summary, Dragon Ball GT is canon, but only within the Dragon Ball Z anime continuity. It doesn't follow the manga's original storyline, but it remains an official Toei-backed continuation of the anime universe. After just 64 episodes and a single feature-length TV special, Dragon Ball GT came to a close with its final episode airing on November 19, 1997. For the first time in over a decade, Dragon Ball fans were left without any episodes to look forward to. During this time, the original 3 anime series continued to receive regular reruns across the various Japanese TV networks. However, in early 2009, Toei Animation and Fuji TV partnered once again to revive the franchise in an unexpected way by introducing a reimagined version of Dragon Ball Z known as Dragon Ball Kai. Officially announced in Weekly Shonen Jump, Dragon Ball Kai was described as a refreshed high-definition remaster of Dragon Ball Z, created to commemorate the anime's 20th anniversary. The first episode aired on April 5th, 2009, coincidentally Akira Toriyama's birthday, as a part of the Fuji TV's new Sunday morning anime block. Kai featured re-recorded voice acting and a brand new musical score, modernized sound effects, and digital visual updates. While the anime largely reused the original Dragon Ball Z footage, the key difference was in the storytelling. Toei emphasized that Kai would carry a higher sense of excitement by removing the majority of the filler content. This was confirmed when the first 13 episodes included a pre-title card labeling the series as the Akira Toriyama original cut version. In effect, Kai was intended to more closely follow the original manga, presenting a streamlined narrative truer to Toriyama's vision, unlike the original Dragon Ball Z anime, which often diverged with filler scenes and additional storylines. This makes Kai a significant entry in the Dragon Ball franchise, not just as a remaster, but as an anime that fits within the manga continuity, as it was intended, rather than the broader anime or movie timeline. It was an attempt to realign the animated series with the original manga's pacing, tone, narrative structure, and highlighting just how far the anime had deviated over the years from its source material. So with that being said, Kai would fall under the manga streamline of Dragon Ball continuity. In July 2012, it was announced that the production of the Dragon Ball franchise's first theatrical movie in 17 years was underway. And that, unlike the franchise's previous movies, it would be a singular film not associated with any seasonal events hosted by Toei or tied to any currently long-going television series. Shortly after the movie was announced, and prior to its official title being established, as a small flyer featuring promotional artwork by Yamamuro was distributed. The flyer prominently displayed the movie stage line, "The mightiest make their move." Toei eventually released a teaser trailer for the yet unnamed Dragon Ball Z movie, which was first shown at Saiko v Jump Festa on the 21st of July 2012. The movie's official title, Battle of Gods, was later confirmed by Shueisha in November of the same year, and the official trailer followed shortly thereafter in December of the same year. Between then and the movie's release on March 30th, 2013, a second full-length trailer and numerous TV commercial spots were released. A few days after the new Dragon Ball Z movie was first announced, Toei released an official press statement for the movie. The global phenomenon Dragon Ball is being made into a movie using Toei Animation's latest technology, consistently realized as Toriyama work, with the original author Akira Toriyama himself deeply involved in the script stage for the first time. An episode from between the animation series Z and GT, or in other words, the blank decade between the end battle with Majin Buu in chapter 517 of the manga and the chapter 518 will be depicted for the first time. Such well-known and charming characters such as Krillin, Piccolo, and Vegeta will all make an appearance. A new story in the official history of Dragon Ball is born. Neither a spin-off nor a side story, one that could be enjoyed by both children and parents, manga fans, and anime fans. The word choice of it being a new story in the official history of Dragon Ball is very telling, as well as it referencing that it will be taking place between chapter 517 and 518 of the original manga. The blank decade will be depicted for the first time, which they say won't be a side story, which is referencing GT, or a spin-off, which is most likely referencing the older DBZ movies. In a promotional pamphlet titled Dragon Ball Z Battle of Gods Battle Book, Toriyama makes a comment surrounding Dragon Ball's resurgence and this film as a whole. He says, apparently it's been 17 years since the last animated Dragon Ball movie. For all the animation up till now, I basically just left everything up to the staff. So this is my first time trying to be involved in starting from the story creation. The key words this time, God of Destruction Beerus and Super Saiyan God, were suggestions from the scriptwriter, but they were good ideas for presenting a crisis for the main characters who had grown so strong they'd reached a point where there was nothing higher. After first deciding on Beerus' character design and background, I tried thinking it up as an original story, imagining it as though the manga's serialization had continued. What's more, the God of Destruction Beerus, who I drew the design for myself, something I don't usually do, is a terrifying opponent so overwhelmingly strong that he surpasses the dimension of the previous enemies. But it's my trademark to not let things get too dark. At the very least, I'm satisfied that it's been finished up and a very entertaining piece of work. By the way, the battle scenes in the second half are particularly overwhelming. I was moved because the presentation exceeded my expectations. Just as you'd expect, Japan's animation is superb. Everyone on the staff, you really did a great job. Please enjoy the first Dragon Ball in a long time. Something important mentioned in this segment is that Akira Toriyama was creating the story, he wrote it with a continuation of his original manga in mind. As notably, it is called Dragon Ball Z Battle of Gods, meaning it was a Z movie. This is even further confirmed when speaking about why he chose this point in the story to make Battle of Gods take place in a weekly Shonen Jump interview. He says, the fact is, I thought, man, I really made everyone old in the last chapter of the manga. I even gave Vegeta a mustache. So I chose this period because everyone got to maximum strength, a few years after the Majin Buu arc and before Pan's birth. Again, his original manga is where he is basing everything off of, and because of that, I think it's fair to say that this Dragon Ball Z movie would fit into the manga stream in terms of continuity of Dragon Ball as a whole. There is also more to suggest and confirm this information in the future, but we'll get to that segment a bit later in the video. Resurrection F is also a continuation of this story since it's a sequel to the movie and also a Z movie. On June 14th, 2015, a brief series appeared on Fuji TV, accompanied by the episode preview for Dragon Ball Kai episode 157. This same preview was later uploaded to the official Dragon Ball Super website and included in the first series Blu-ray box set. Following the conclusion of Kai's Majin Buu arc and building on success of recent theatrical releases, Battle of Gods and Resurrection F, the Dragon Ball Super television series officially began in 2015. The series initially recapped and expanded on the stories told in 2 films, but eventually moved into original territory, introducing the concept of multiple universes and the divine hierarchy throughout tournaments and interstellar universal conflicts. However, it's important to note that Super's retelling of Battle of Gods and Resurrection F differs significantly from the original films. This suggests that the Dragon Ball Super anime doesn't perfectly align with those movie continuities. Even so, because Super continues from Dragon Ball Kai, which follows the manga timeline, the anime TV series is still considered a part of the manga's original narrative stream. In essence, the Super anime and the 2 films serve as alternate versions of the same continuity of the original Dragon Ball manga. The Dragon Ball Super anime came to a close in 2018, but its manga adaptation continued in V-Jump, with brand new manga exclusive arcs. This included the Broly storyline and adaptation of 2023 film Dragon Ball Super Superhero. These films acted as follow-ups to the anime's ending, giving fans a look at what Goku and the others were doing post-Tournament of Power. At New York Comic Con on October 7, 2021, new updates were revealed for Dragon Ball Super Superhero during a dedicated panel. During the panel, Capsule Corporation president Akio Iyoku was asked a few questions. They started it off by saying that the Dragon Ball Super anime continues from the end of the original manga. But what about this movie? Is it a continuation of the manga as well? I really love Akira Toriyama's original Dragon Ball manga, so I'd be thrilled if this movie connects to it. And Akio Yoku said that Dragon Ball Super takes place during the final years covered by the original Dragon Ball manga, specifically the 10-year period after Goku's fight with Majin Buu. Since the story is written by Toriyama Sensei himself, it naturally connects to the manga. Toriyama also echoed this statement in a separate interview for Superhero, reinforcing the same idea. He says that the anime series since 2013 has been a casual continuation of my original manga. For newcomers, understanding all the character relationships might be tricky at first, so they might need to cover some background. But for longtime fans, the story should be easy to follow even on a first viewing. He also notes that this refers to the anime and movies starting with Battle of Gods and continuing with Resurrection F, Dragon Ball Super, and Dragon Ball Super Broly. This statement essentially confirms that all the animated projects since Dragon Ball's resurgence, Battle of Gods, Resurrection F, Dragon Ball Super Broly, and Dragon Ball Super Superhero are continuations of Toriyama's original manga. While they may present alternative takes or story versions like Super versus the films, they still fall under the same narrative umbrella rooted in the manga, as we mentioned earlier in this video. Interestingly, despite being a direct continuation, Super's manga is not mentioned in Toriyama's comment. The Super manga, while closely related, diverges quite a bit from the anime in its execution, particularly in arcs like Goku Black and the Tournament of Power, which unfold differently across the two mediums. However, in recent years, the gap between the anime and manga has started to close. The Broly film was officially incorporated into the manga's continuity, followed by the adaptation of Dragon Ball Super Superhero. Because of this, it's fair to say that the Dragon Ball Super manga is also a legitimate continuation of the original Z manga, despite some varying differences between it and the anime. Regardless though, both are rooted in the same overarching story conceived by Akira Toriyama, and offering a different interpretation of what happens after Dragon Ball Z's original manga. So by now, things should be much clearer regarding what parts of Dragon Ball franchise are canon and how their variation stories connect. Everything we discussed so far is considered canon, and it all happened at some point in the franchise's timeline. However, that doesn't mean everything exists within the same continuity. The current main continuity is the one followed by Dragon Ball Super, but then Dragon Ball Daima came along and really shook things up. On October 12, 2023, during New York Comic-Con, Toei Animation officially announced a brand new Dragon Ball TV series was in production, Dragon Ball Daima. The announcement confirmed that the original manga creator Akira Toriyama was involved in both the story and the character development. Alongside the trailer, a written message from Akira Toriyama was shared by franchise executive producer Akio Yoku. He says, "Hello, I'm Akira Toriyama. I'm currently working on a new Dragon Ball. The title is Dragon Ball Daima. Daima is a made-up word, but if written in Japanese, it would be translated to something like evil in English. Due to a conspiracy, Goku and his friends are turned small. To set things right, they travel to a brand new world. It's going to be a grand adventure filled with intense action in an unknown and mysterious setting. Because of his smaller size, Goku will be using his Nioibo, something that fans haven't seen in a long time. I came up with the story, the settings, and even many of the character designs myself. I'm actually putting more effort into this project than usual. This story will touch on mysteries that go deep into the Dragon Ball universe. I hope you enjoy this unique blend of adorable yet powerful battles." With this reveal, Dragon Ball fans immediately began speculating. The series was said to take place after the Majin Buu saga of Dragon Ball Z, making it a direct sequel. Because of this, many assumed that it was part of the same timeline as Dragon Ball Super and would eventually tie into that narrative. Adding to the belief was the heavy involvement of Toriyama himself, more so than in any other Dragon Ball project aside from his original manga. This led many to assume that Daima was officially canon. However, not long after, fans began noticing inconsistencies within the story and raising questions about how or if Daima actually connects to Dragon Ball Super. While that's still largely debated, what is clear is that Dragon Ball Daima directly draws things from the original manga and is part of the same overarching continuation as Battle of Gods and Dragon Ball Super, both of which follow the events of the original Dragon Ball Z manga. You can tell this by the different elements in the story and the fact that they directly use manga panels that are animated, alongside Akio Yoku's statement of it being a continuation of the original manga. So whether or not you consider Daima to be within the Super continuity, it is canon either way. As with many things in the Dragon Ball franchise, determining which continuity a story belongs to depends on how you interpret the overall timeline.